This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
Oh, what a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
I am Josh Hennig. We're back here on Game Night. A little night off yesterday here on 97.3 ESPN thanks to the NFL doubleheader. But I'm back sitting here in the Matt Black Kia Studios hanging out with you here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, the PlaySugarHouse.com text board is open at 609-403-0973. Coming up on the show, we'll have Gary Myers, veteran NFL reporter and writer, Pro Hall of Fame voter, also author of the books How About Them Cowboys and Brady versus Manning. We'll get into the dumpster fire known as the NFC East. Because, let's be realistic, with the Giants game coming up on Thursday night, of course, you can hear all the action right here on 97.3 ESPN. Coverage begins with Game Night and Sports Bash all day leading up to Eagles football with Merrill Reese and Mike Quick. After watching that game last night, I put this out on Twitter last night. And I appreciate those of you who went and liked my post. But you know what was absent from my post last night was all the people who I was talking about. And that's what I want to get into today before we have Gary Myers coming on in about less than 20 minutes from now. I'm watching that Cowboys game last night, and I want to know where all the haters are. All of you guys who dump on Carson Wentz, all you guys who complain about Jim Schwartz and Doug Peterson, all you people who complain about Howie Roseman. Did you see the Cowboys game last night? You think the Eagles are in a bad place? You don't know bad. See, one of the problems in the world we live in today is that you have two kinds of people. You have the people who always think the grass is greener on the other side of the fence. And then you have a group of people who think the grass is never greener on the other side of the fence. The problem is that there's usually an in-between there. There's no real extremes with all this. Today, the report came out that has been corroborated, by the way, by multiple people now. Jane Slater of the NFL Network, who's been on the Sports Bash with Mike Gill and Hunter Brody before. This has been corroborated by a bunch of people who covered the Cowboys in the NFL. The Cowboy players, as they sit at 2-4, there is discontent leaking out of their locker room. They say the coaching staff is, quote, totally unprepared. They don't teach. They don't have any sense of adjusting on the fly, unquote. Another person said, quote, they're just not good at their jobs. If you watch that Cowboys game yesterday, you know what you realize? Man, the Eagles really not that bad. You know, the Cowboys have had pretty easy going so far in terms of who their opponents are. And if it wasn't for two Ezekiel Elliott fumbles, the Cardinals don't win that game by 20 points. Let's be realistic. The Cowboys would have had a shot to win, but your star player who you paid before your quarterback fumbles the ball twice. Your number one offensive lineman, the highest paid guard in the NFL, goes down with a concussion issue. You have a defense that has a couple of nice players like Jalen Smith and DeMarcus Lawrence and whenever Leighton Vander Esch is healthy, he's always good. You have talent on the team. Talent's not good enough. They're not a good enough team. And I never thought in a million years that a post-Jason Garrett era coaching staff would be this incompetent. But guess what? They are. And I'm watching that game, and all I kept thinking is, man, the Eagles' backup linemen look like better than the Cowboys' backup offensive linemen. And the Eagles' backup secondary players are better than Daryl Worley. Yeah. That Daryl Worley. You know, the guy who was signed by the Eagles for a hot second, and then he got in trouble, and then he got released? That Daryl Worley. He's on the Cowboys now. And he's getting burned by Christian Kirk on Monday Night Football. And I'm watching this game, and I'm thinking, for all the talent that's on the Cowboys offense, they struggle to get 10 points. The Eagles have scored 20-plus points. They scored, 25 against the 49ers, 28 and 29 in the last couple weeks. The Cowboys couldn't score half of that against the Cardinals. The Cardinals, who are without their best pass rusher, one of the best in the NFL, Chandler Jones, for the rest of the year. He's done. He's out. Yeah, Buda Baker had a great game, but he was also running against the Cowboys team with their backup quarterback and their backup offensive line. And the Eagles found a way to score almost 30 points against the Ravens and the Steelers and the 49ers, three teams that everybody and their cousin thought were all playoff teams coming into the year. But yet the Dallas Cowboys can't score more than 10 points against the Cardinals? You know, Andy Dalton, you heard on the broadcast, oh, he led the Bengals to 5 straight playoff appearances. Yeah, you know what Andy Dalton did in those playoff appearances? Nothing. He never won a game. Andy Dalton has never won a playoff game. Never, ever, ever. So when I'm watching the Cowboys game last night, and when I'm watching the Giants find a way to beat Washington thanks to Ron Rivera basically deciding to be more of a risk taker than anything else, all I can think is, man, the Philadelphia Eagles look pretty good. The Eagles may very well be the best team in the division. And at 97.3 ESPN on Twitter, we put up the poll question earlier today. Who wins the NFC East? We posted that about 5+ hours ago. And about 5.5 hours later, 84% say Eagles. 8.7% say the Cowboys. 3.3% say the Giants. And 4% say Washington. Now, I'm very well aware that a lot of people who listen to us are probably Eagle fans. I'm also aware that 3.3% are probably the diehard Giant fans out there. Bless your heart. I feel bad for you. Dave Gettleman is your GM. That guy falls in and out of love all the time. Washington, I can at least stomach that idea because at least Washington has a defense. I don't know what they're doing with the quarterback, but they at least have a defense. The 8.7% Cowboy fans feel like just a bunch of contrarians because there's no way you're watching that game that I saw last night and you think the Cowboys are a playoff team. You can vote for yourself at 973 ESPN on Twitter right now. Who wins the NFC East? The Cowboys, the Eagles, the Giants, or the Washington football team? At 973 ESPN on Twitter. I have to agree with the 84%. Let's be realistic. The Philadelphia Eagles have the better coaching staff in the division, which I know frustrates the Jim Schwartz and the Doug Peterson, the Jim Schwartz haters and the Doug Peterson complainers. The Eagles arguably are the better quarterback right now of all 4 teams, considering that Dak Prescott's out for the year. I don't even know who Washington's quarterback is. I mean, is it really Kyle Allen? Is Alex Smith going to get more playing time moving forward? Does Dwayne Haskins eventually get the job back? I have no idea what they're doing with the quarterback situation down there in Washington. And if you really think Daniel Jones is better than Carson Wentz, you and I need to have a conversation about your vision. You need to go see an eye doctor, my friend. We need to have an honest conversation about your judgment. What do the Eagles have that is really that much worse than anybody else in the division? You could argue the Eagles have the best defensive line. The Eagles do have the worst linebackers. But as we saw on Monday Night Football, Dallas has some very good linebackers. And guess what? It didn't matter. Didn't matter one stinking bit. You could argue the Cowboys had the best receiving core. You know, with CeeDee Lamb, and Amari Cooper, and Michael Gallup. Heck, I know a lot of you probably have one of those 3 receivers on your fantasy football team. They have Ezekiel Elliott. Again, there's probably a lot of you that have Zeke on your fantasy football team. But none of those guys mattered when the team lost last night and only scored 10 points. There is no way you can watch this weekend and walk away and think that this Eagles team doesn't have a chance to win the division. And don't be sour about winning the division with a losing record. Because I remind you, what has happened in the past? In the NFL, in recent times, might I add. What happened recently in the NFL? Well, there have been not one, but two different times that teams with losing records have won their divisions. The 2010 Seahawks won the division at 7-9. They also won the wild card round. You might remember that beast mode, Marshawn Lynch running all over the Saints. They beat them. They lost in the divisional round to the Bears. That's the Jay Cutler Bears, by the way, in 2010. In 2014, the Panthers won their division at 7-8-1. That sounds like the Eagles' record is probably going to be at the end of the year, thanks to their tie with the Bengals. The Panthers won the wild card over the Cardinals. That would be Bruce Arians and Carson Palmer Cardinals. They lost in the divisional round to some team called the Seahawks in the Legion of Boom. You just got to get into the playoffs. You've heard me quote this before, folks. As Dominic Toretto says, it doesn't matter if you win by an inch or a mile. Winning's winning. No one said it had to be aesthetically pleasing. I'm not saying the Eagles are going to win a Super Bowl. I'm just saying that if you don't think they're better than the rest of the division, I don't know what to do about it. I can't help you there. 609-403-0973, the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. To get on the conversation. 609-403-0973 for the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. Place your legal sports bets at PlaySugarHouse.com. Sign up now. The match first deposit up to $250. Must be 21 in order to play. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 609-403-0973 for the PlaySugarHouse.com text board. Dan EHT chimes in and says clearly the Giants and the Redskins have the better defenses in the division. Well, the problem, Dan, is that having a better defense only got them the same number of wins as the Eagles. See, teams win games. I think that the Washington football team probably has one of the best front sevens in the NFL. But because their offense is basically a dumpster fire, they got one win on the year. That was against the Eagles, thanks to Carson Wentz throwing 2 interceptions. And the Giants, I mean, if anybody deserves credit, I mean, all right, is the Giants a good defense, or is the Giants coaching staff that much better this year under Joe Judge? Because Joe Judge basically cleaned house. And I think you got to give some credit to Patrick Graham, the defensive coordinator. I think that's probably a big reason why this team is doing so well. Between Joe Judge and Patrick Graham, and then try to remember the other guy who they brought in. Dagnabbit. Derek Dooley. He's a defensive guy from college. So you're bringing in a couple different people in there to this organization with, Brett Bielema. That's the guy I'm thinking of. Yeah, Bielema's a defensive-minded, grinded out, no nonsense. I mean, when Bielema was at Arkansas, he was trying to get in fights with everybody at press conferences. That guy's a curmudgeon. You don't think that guy's letting a fire under all those players' rears? Come on. I mean, Joe Judge brought in probably the most ornery guy on college football onto his coaching staff. That's why with the Giants, they at least have an okay defense. Not because the players are amazing. It's because they got a guy on the defensive staff who literally is just screaming and cussing at them all the time. Half those guys are probably scared out of their doggone minds. They might get cut because of that guy. So to say that those two teams have a better record, a better defense than the Eagles is it's not really saying much. And by the way, the Eagles are still top 10 in the NFL in sacks, quarterback hurries, quarterback hits. They're getting pressure on the quarterback. Sure, their linebackers are garbage, and their secondary is basically a mash unit, but they're not horrible. I think sometimes we have these expectations, and when the expectations don't get met, we lose context and vision. Context is everything. Without context, you're just mumbling and bumbling along. Sometimes there is a reason why there's a traffic jam on the parkway, and it's not because there's a truck 2 cars in front of you. Might be a car accident down the road. Context. And context tells me the Philadelphia Eagles, despite being 1-4-1 right now, have a lot better shot to win this division than anybody else. And that's bizarre. But welcome to 2020. Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Coming up tonight, Game 1 of the World Series, Dodgers and Rays. I happen to agree with Hunter and Mike Gill. I think that the Rays win tonight. Kershaw is going to implode at some point in this game tonight. You can hear it all right here on 97.3 ESPN. Coverage begins at 7:30. Next up on Game Night here on 97.3 ESPN, Gary Myers, Pro Football Hall of Fame voter, also New York Times Best Selling author, has covered the NFC East for years, both in New York and Dallas. We'll get his perspective on the NFC East next on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app, powered by First Bank of Sea Isle City.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Keep a text coming, 609-403-0973 for the PlaySugarHouse.com text board here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh Hennig hanging out with you. Of course, we got baseball coming up today, Game 1 of the World Series, Dodgers versus Rays at 7:30 right here on 97.3 ESPN. Right now, we'll continue talking NFC East with Gary Myers. You can follow him on Twitter at Gary Myers NY. New York Times best-selling author of How About, of course, the Brady versus Manning book. You got the brand new podcast out there, Brady versus Manning. Also a great book about the Dallas Cowboys as well. Great insights. If you haven't read that book about the Cowboys, it's just incredible, because the insights he has about Jerry Jones and all of those guys down there in Dallas, just a history of the Dallas Cowboys and how they came to pretty much where they are now. How about them Cowboys? The author himself, Gary Myers, joins us now here on 97.3 ESPN. Gary, how you doing today?
Great tonight, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. You know, this NFC East, it's incredible of how ridiculously poor all these teams are. I mean, did you even think it could be this bad coming into the year? I don't think anybody did.
No, I actually thought the Cowboys were going to be pretty good. Their offense is explosive, at least it was, before Dak got hurt and the whole offensive line went out. I had no idea, and I'm sure they didn't either, how bad the defense was going to be. But I thought I didn't think this was going to be a Super Bowl year for them, but I thought they would win the division fairly easily and then, have a chance to maybe win a game or two in the playoffs. But it's just, they can't stop anybody. They gave 34 points to the Giants, and the Giants have only averaged, I don't even know what it is, like 13 or 14 points in their other games. And then the other three teams are just, they're horrible. The Giants are bad, the Eagles are bad, Washington's really bad. It's a far cry from the days in the 1980s, and I'm sure you're too young to remember any of this stuff, but when you had Landry and Parcells and Gibbs and Buddy Ryan, and, before the Cowboys, started having problems, 80s, those four coaches and those four teams, that was the best football I've ever seen play. And to think that all these years later, it's by far the worst division and could get historically bad before it's all said and done.
You touched on how bad the Cowboys were. Let's start with them specifically, because without Dak Prescott, it's so obvious how much this team was flawed, and now without him covering up a lot of those flaws, you have Ezekiel Elliott fumble the ball twice. Like, they paid him before they paid Dak, and it just seems like all the flaws and all the issues in the Cowboys organization are just coming now to the surface now that Dak is out for the year.
Yeah, I'm not going to criticize the Cowboys for how they handled the Dak situation. They offered him a 5-year contract before training camp started, all through the off season. They had over $100 million guaranteed. And it was a 5-year deal, and he wanted a 4-year deal because he wanted to be in position to be renegotiated or negotiate again, in a shorter period of time. So I put that on him, and especially because, he didn't get the financial protection in the contract and played on a 1-year franchise tag. I mean, I hope he recovers and can be the same dynamic player that he was, for the first month of this season. But I thought that was a really bad decision on his part. So, they signed Zeke before they signed Dak. I mean, that's absolutely true. But they gave too much money to Zeke. But it's not like they didn't want to pay Dak. He just didn't want to take what they were offering. And but for a fourth-round pick after 4 years to be offered a contract with over $100 million guaranteed, it's really hard to criticize the Cowboys in that regard.
So then after watching last night's game, is it just they're just too injured? Is it a lack of continuity? We know the report came out today saying that players are not happy with the coaching staff. I mean, what do you point to for the disaster we saw last night?
It's easier to sit here and second guess hiring Mike McCarthy, that it wasn't a very inspired choice. They had a fallout with Aaron Rodgers towards the end of their time together in Green Bay. I know Aaron's not the easiest to coach, but he's a really smart guy. And I mean, to me, that was a red flag. Jerry wanted a proven coach. McCarthy won a Super Bowl, but that was a while ago. I don't know what kind of staff he went about putting together, but Mike Nolan obviously has not done a very good job as a defensive coordinator. But you can almost say this about every team, Josh. They've had a ton of injuries. I mean, their offensive line is wiped out. They lost their quarterback. And the way that team is constructed now, the only way they were going to win games was by outscoring them in high-scoring games. And with Andy Dalton getting exposed last night, I don't think there's much optimism in Dallas that they can, win those 35-31 shootouts that they had been winning, or at least been involved in every week. So they're in big trouble. But again, you can say it about every team in the league. I mean, in all the years I've been around this, I really don't remember this early in the season having so many injuries and then so many key players among those who were injured. I mean, there's just a laundry list of big-name players who were either out for an extended period of time or out for the season. The only thing that's helping the Cowboys right now is the same thing that's helping the other three teams in the division. And the only reason they have hope is because the division is so bad, and somebody's got to make the playoffs. That's the way the rules are written. And if you look at these teams, that nobody has more than 2 wins, and after 6 weeks, and one of them's got to win the division and they might wind up hosting a team that's won 4 more games than them in the wild card round.
Yeah, it's nuts. Gary Myers joining us here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline on 97.3 ESPN, New York Times best-selling author of books like How About Them Cowboys, also Brady versus Manning. You can follow him on Twitter at Gary Myers NY. Gary, let's look at the Eagles, because last time you and I talked, the Eagles are coming off of arguably their worst game of the year, and it seems like they've gotten a little bit better, at least optically, since then. They've had 2 straight weeks now where they've put up a decent amount of points against 2 potential, Super Bowl contenders, and the Steelers and the Ravens, something the Cowboys couldn't do last night. The Cowboys scored 10 points. The Eagles are scoring almost 30 despite all of their injuries. What do you think about the Eagles, how they've found a way to at least look like they're a better team? Maybe not they're winning games, but at least they look like a better team than week 1, where it looks like they couldn't do anything right.
Yeah, and they came on, strong at the end to make that score against the Ravens closer than it appeared that the game was for most of it. And if they made the 2-point conversion, they would have got it into overtime. And then you never know what's going to happen. That would have been a huge victory for the Eagles and could have really got them going on a nice run. I don't know. They have Miles. I haven't really followed what's happened down there the last 2 days, so I don't know whether is Miles Sanders going to play. I know Zach Ertz is out.
Miles Sanders and Zach Ertz are both out for at least, looks like 2 to 4 weeks. Okay,
so you lose your best pass catcher and your best running back, which is kind of what the Giants are out with, that Saquon Barkley and Sterling Shepard. And like I said, this is just like an epidemic almost. And I don't like using that word considering we're going through a pandemic, but it just seems that you look at any team and you can say out of the 10 best players going into the season, how many are they missing? And it seems everybody's missing at least 2 or 3 of their 10 best guys. So I thought the Eagles' shortcoming, before this whole thing got started, was they didn't have enough explosive weapons, especially at wideout. And I really haven't seen anything that would make you feel differently. I know they've gotten production from unexpected sources, but I don't know if that's going to sustain itself over the course of the season.
The other 2 teams, the NFC East, they both played each other on Sunday, and basically I think most people would agree that the Giants won because Ron Rivera gambled at the end because it's part of his nature. I mean, I think Washington has a good defense. I don't know what they're doing at quarterback. And the Giants, I mean, I don't know what on earth is going on with that team half the time, because I feel like the press conferences during the week with Joe Judge are more interested in their actual play on the field.
Yeah, they've been pretty dreadful offensively. The defense is getting a little bit better, although they were trying to protect a 7-point lead, and they let Kyle Allen go right down the field in the last 3 minutes. And that's another game that would have gone on to overtime. They only need to kick the extra point. But obviously Rivera thought that was his chance to win the game right there. They've just given up on Dwayne Haskins, it appears to me, that to be starting Kyle Allen and to have Alex Smith as the backup, and Haskins isn't even dressing. I know he's been ill lately, but that's what happens when you have a regime change, and the previous regime is responsible for taking the quarterback in the first round, and the next coach obviously has no loyalty to him because it wasn't his recommendation that they pick him. And now Rivera's playing his backup quarterback from Carolina. And it appears that Washington will be in the market for quarterback yet again after this season. I certainly wouldn't count them out of the Trevor Lawrence derby, although I think that the Jets pretty much have that locked up because they haven't won a game, and I don't see a game that they're going to win. But, the most amazing stat, Josh, about the NFC East is the 4 teams have combined for 5 victories. And there are 6 teams in the NFL that have 5 victories. So combined, the NFC East has only equaled the victories of 6 other teams.
It's
just amazing. It is. And with the Giants, you had the transition to a new coach and a new staff with limited talent. And I do like him. As a coach, I like what I'm hearing from him, and apparently the players really like him, which is important. But the Giants just don't have very much talent on that team, and Daniel Jones is yet to take that step in his second year that they were anticipating after he started 12 games as a rookie.
You mentioned the Jets. I'd be remiss if I didn't touch on them, because the last time you and I talked, you had mentioned that if the Jets are serious about tanking for Trevor Lawrence, they would keep Adam Gase as their head coach for the year. Well, it's a few weeks into the season, but it looks like that little prophecy of yours might come true. Maybe if they do keep Adam Gase, they do go 0-16, because, I mean, even Joe Douglas is shaking his head up there in the press box, or at least the owner's box, because that came on the video during the game on Sunday. I mean, the Jets, I mean, oh my goodness. I mean, I thought the NFC East was bad. Then you go watch a Jets game and you realize, oh, never mind.
Yeah, they're just not competitive. And at this point, see, if you get a stink, I happen to think this is a good year to stink, because with no fans in the stands, you don't have to put up with the verbal abuse that you otherwise would. I mean, you can imagine, this fire Gase chants would have started in the season opener. And, they actually played Buffalo in the opener in their first home game. And it would have been, protests in the parking lot and all that. Now, the only thing that, the fans can voice their displeasure on the radio, or, the negative stories that are showing up on the newspapers and the websites. But the teams, the coaches, the players can tune that out. They don't have to listen to the radio. They don't have to read anything. But if there are fans in the stands, then you're getting immediate feedback that you can't avoid. And I think the lack of that will help the Jets this year keep gaze for the entire season if that's what they want to do. Because without having to face their fans, the Jets can kind of pretty much do what they want. And then they'll be in a desperate situation after the season to hire a coach who has a tremendous amount of credibility that will be able to coach Trevor Lawrence. And if they don't wind up with the first pick, at least get enough talent around and get Sam Darnold straightened out. But the key for the Jets will be they can't hire a first-time head coach. They can't hire a failed head coach. And I've suggested a few times that if the Saints win the Super Bowl or Drew Brees retires after the year, and I think Brees is going to retire, then maybe that'll be the time that Sean Payton is ready for a new challenge and $15 million a year in total control. And maybe the Jets can make a Parcells-type hire from the late 90s and bring Sean Payton in. It's going to take something like that to get their fans to come back next year.
He's Gary Myers. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at Gary Myers NY. Also, he's the host of the new podcast, The GOAT, Tom Brady. Gary, tell us a little bit about that podcast, because I read your book, Brady versus Manning, which is an excellent book. So tell us a little bit about the podcast and what you're doing with that.
Yeah, Josh, what I've done is it's a 12-episode podcast in which I really trace Tom's football career and some of the things going on in his life off the field, and use a lot of the audio from the interviews I did for that book. So it's one thing to read some of the quotes in the book. It's another thing to be able to listen to them. And nobody's ever heard these interviews before, and I only use some of it in the book. So I try to work in just about everything that Brady and I talked about when I did the book. And then it's just interviews with so many other people like Peyton and Kraft and Archie and Tom's dad and current and former teammates. So it, I think it's really I think it's a fun listen. Fans are split on Brady, whether you either love him or you hate him, but I think this appeals just to football fans in general because he is a really intriguing guy and has had just a fabulous career. And I've gotten a lot of good feedback on it. So it's my first venture into the world of podcasts, and it's been fun so far.
Well, I already got it loaded up on my Spotify, so I'm looking forward to listening to it again. That's The GOAT, Tom Brady is the podcast. Of course, you can get it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you have your podcasting. He's Gary Myers, his old guest. He joined us here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline here on 97.3 ESPN. Gary, always appreciate the time and the conversation.
Take care, Josh. Have a good night.
Josh Hennig here on GameNight on 97.3 ESPN. GameNight being brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call with 4 convenient locations to serve you. Visit them online at gmslaw.com. We'll get back to the text board coming up next. 609-403-0973 here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM and the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea City.
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
609-403-0973 with the PlaySugarHouse.com text board to get on the conversation. 609-403-0973. Don't forget, one more Sports Bash Cash keyword coming up less than 10 minutes from right now. I will give you the final Sports Bash Cash keyword of the day here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Take that word, you go to 97.3ESPN.com or the 97.3 ESPN mobile app for your chance to win up to $10,000. Don't forget World Series Game 1 tonight on 97.3 ESPN. Rays, Dodgers. Unlike the NFC East, those are two of the winningest teams in baseball this year. Meanwhile, the NFC East, they're pretty much just records are horrible at everything. You heard Gary Myers say it. The NFC East has a combined 5 wins this year. The teams with 5 wins total by themselves this year are the Seahawks, the Bears, the Chiefs, the Steelers, the Ravens, and the Titans. So It's going to be a messy year for the NFC East. But as Gary Meyer said, look, you're almost kind of looking forward to seeing how bad it can get because there's a part of you that wants to see how crazy this will get. I'm not going to put it past a team to win the division with a possibly 6 or 7 wins. I think that's probably what we're likely going to see. Especially considering that there is no team in the NFC East who has scored more points than they've allowed this year. The Dallas Cowboys have allowed the most points in the division with 218. That's why they are the worst defense in the division. The team that scored the most points, though, is also Dallas Cowboys, which is why I think a lot of people thought at least inserting Andy Dalton in, he might not be Dak Prescott, but he should at least be a serviceable quarterback. And as you saw last night, it was like the offensive line didn't even know what they're doing. They're going the wrong way, sometimes on a play, the opposite of the blitz. I mean, that one Buda Baker blast on Andy Dalton, it was basically because no one picked him up. The offensive line ran right by him, allowing him a free shot at their quarterback. So when you think about the NFC East, you got to realize that for the Philadelphia Eagles, they've had a tough schedule to start the year. I mean, you get the 49ers, the Steelers, and the Ravens, no matter who's healthy or not. Those are still some very good teams with some great coaching staffs. Yeah, you go 1-2 against them, but you still scored over 20 points in all those games. You showed a little life on offense. You're trying to finally turning things around a little bit offensively. And defensively, you got lit up by a future Hall of Famer and the league MVP. Lamar Jackson and Ben Roethlisberger, I mean, you got to believe they're 2 of the top 5 or 10 quarterbacks in the league. You only allowed 20 points to the second and third string quarterbacks of the 49ers. So it's not like the Eagles' defense is complete garbage. It could be worse. It could be the Cowboys. Your offense is certainly better than the New York Giants have only scored 101 points this year. I mean, you guys complain about Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson. Have you seen a Giants game? Oh, my. I mean, let me tell you what the Giants' scores have been this year. This is the team you're going against on Thursday night football. You can hear it right here on 97.3 ESPN. This is the team you're going against on Thursday night football. They've scored 16 points, 13 points, 9 points, 9 points, 34 against the Cowboys, and then on Sunday they had 20. What? Come on. And by the way, half those games were with Saquon Barkley. They beat the Washington football team without Saquon. They scored 34 against the Cowboys without Saquon. Saquon's arguably the best running back in the league. And this is the team you're going up against. I'm not saying we can't criticize Peterson and Wentz. I've been the head of the line in criticizing those guys. But you got to realize how good you have it. Man, this NFC East is a dumpster fire. And you know what? I'm here for all the entertainment. You can hear all the entertainment right here on 97.3 ESPN. Of course, Eagles and Giants. Merrill Reese, Mike Quick on the call. Thursday night right here on 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget tomorrow on Game Night, the Weinberg Wednesday. Veteran Eagles writer Dave Weinberg will join the show. We'll get into the state of the Eagles as well as some of Jim Schwartz's comments, his takeaways from the Eagles Eagles loss over the Ravens, and look ahead to Thursday night right here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. That's tomorrow night. Tonight on 97.3 ESPN, World Series Game 1, Dodgers versus Rays. And I'd be remiss if I don't bring up the Dodgers versus Rays because, let's be realistic, this is probably the World Series matchup most people didn't expect heading into the postseason. Just because those were the two of the winningest teams in baseball didn't mean that we all predicted they would get there. I think there were a lot of people who looked at other teams in the American and National Leagues and assumed they could make it. Teams like the Astros and the Yankees, even the White Sox and the A's, those were all teams that were heavily favored and believed they could make a deep run. I know a lot of people look at the Padres as a potential World Series team. People looked at the Braves as a potential World Series team with their pitching staff. People looked at a team like even the Cubs, who got knocked out very early, as a team that could potentially make a deep run. And instead, we got the Dodgers and we got the Rays. And a huge part of that is the fact that both those teams are built very differently. The Dodgers are a team that is built with 2 MVP award winners and some depth in the pitching staff. They got some bashers in the lineup, and they got depth in the pitching staff. It's a lineup that hits a lot of deep bombs. It's a lineup that's got a lot of sluggers. And on the flip side, you got a Rays team that is built on analytics and the concept of getting guys who can make contact. As a Rain, I know he's known for hitting home runs now, but he's a guy who was hitting the ball all year long, making good contact. And they got that bizarro pitching staff with guys like Yarborough that are these, they're not really starting pitchers. They're more like these opening pitchers for the bullpen. Charlie Morton is, I guess, hands down the most experienced pitcher on the team. I know Blake Snell's got the Cy Young, but he's not as experienced as Charlie Morton is. So you got Morton, you got Snell, and you got a bunch of guys who, as Kevin Cash says, can all throw 98. So it's a great differences heading into this matchup, and I'm looking forward to it. I know the LCSs were averaging between 3 and 5 million viewers, so we know that people are watching baseball right now. Maybe partially because people are just trying to get away from everything else going on in the world. But you know what? We got baseball tonight, baseball tomorrow night. Right here on 97.3 ESPN. Again, 609-403-0973, PlaceYourHouse.com text board. You want to get anything before we get out of here? We didn't get to it yesterday, as we didn't have the show yesterday, but the weekend was a very interesting weekend for me in terms of the football in general. We went 3-2 over the weekend, so could be worse. I feel like I've been saying that every week now, so I got to find a new thing to say. I'll get back to you on that. But we went 3-2 over the weekend. What did we get right? Well, we got Navy -2 right. Navy won 27-23. East Carolina, they stayed in it. They fought hard. They just didn't have enough. And that's part of the reason why I was going with Navy. I really felt like Navy would hold the ball and they would win the game. I got wrong? Temple -12. I mean, what on earth happened in that Temple game? USF is one of the worst teams in that conference, and Temple beat them by 2 points. Temple might have a rough year this year. If you can't beat USF by more than 2 points when you're already favored to win by 12, it's going to be a long year for Temple. I thought Temple would play a lot better than that, considering how hard-fought their game was the week before. Liberty didn't just beat Syracuse by over -2.5. They beat Syracuse by 17. I told you, Liberty's got a lot of guys returning. Syracuse has cemented themselves as one of the most pathetic teams in all of college football. Liberty came in there hot, 4-0, averaging over 33 points per game. Well, they got 38 against Syracuse. What did we get wrong? I thought Tennessee would win that game handily. Tennessee didn't just lose the game. They got totally destroyed by Kentucky. I don't know what to do with this Kentucky team. One day they're being destroyed by Auburn, another game they can't stop anybody against Ole Miss, for example. They basically won the game against Mississippi State because Mississippi State had so many turnovers. And now you crush a good, solid Tennessee team. I have no idea what Kentucky is anymore. I don't know if they're good. I don't know if they're not good. I don't know if they're advantageous. I just don't know what they are anymore. And then what else did we get right? NC State -4.5 versus Duke. There's that man again, Devin Leary. Over 200 passing yards. They won by 11 points. They're winning games. Now, he did have a rough day. It wasn't the best game for Devin Leary. 1 touchdown, 1 interception. But the completion percentage is really good. And I think that's what we're going to get from him, at least so far this year, is going to be consistency. He's going to be a solid, good quarterback. He's not going to flash. He's not always going to have the biggest games in the world. But he's going to go out there and be consistent. Now, help you win some games. You get NC State now 4-1 on the year. They're 2-0 with him as their starting quarterback. So overall, we went 3-2. Try to do better again next weekend. Football Fridays here on GameNight on 97.3 ESPN. We got the Eagles on Thursday night. College football this weekend. A lot of football going on. I love it. I'm all for it. World Series tonight. Well, a change of pace. Why not? By the way, I'm picking the Dodgers to win the series in 7. Not that that means anything because I don't pick baseball very well.